Real estate doesn't start when you buy it. It starts with planning before you buy it. But just in the same way, you've got to be strategic about how you exit.
Who's this? Oh, you're an entrepreneur? Oh, you're a real estate investor. Oh, you're trying to learn from those who did it. Well, come into the lab then. Put your white coat on, gloves on, notepad, and let's build, y'all.
Real estate experiment. What is happening, y'all? Today, I have the pleasure of having a gentleman I've been playing. It's actually my fault. This is long overdue. We've been trying to get Dave scheduled. Dave's been eager to come into the lab, and we finally, in 2024 Q1, were able to get him in what I believe is just in time, because with the subject matter expertise and the experiment that Dave has done himself in his lab as a qualified intermediary, I think is a perfect time of the year to discuss the importance of this strategy that, if I believe, Dave, you're the only qualified intermediary that I've ever had here in the lab. And I think it's very critical for us to have this conversation, especially when we start thinking about scaling and scaling our portfolios and being strategic with the end goal in mind. So, Dave, at the same time, you come here as the author as well of a new book, Lifetime Tax-Free Wealth, The Real Estate Investor's Guide to a 1031 Exchange. We may have heard it before, but I want you to share with us in the flesh why this is so important. Dave, thank you so much for finally being able to have you here in the lab. How are you doing today, Dave?
I am doing awesome. You know what? I think we might be able to say that I was just waiting until the temperature of the lab was warmer than the temperature in Southwest Florida. But
I think that would be accurate.
since we know it's all distant anyways, yeah. No, it is so good to be here. I just, this is what life is all about, right? It's about experimenting and taking the results of that to improve your next set of data. And for me in my life's journey, that's exactly what it's been. And I've just been really blessed to have stumbled onto, in one of my failures, the 1031 exchange. And that has changed my life ever since for 30 years. Because the 1031 exchange, for the folks listening, they're going, what's that? The 1031 exchange is what allows real estate investors to sell investment real estate and buy new investment real estate and indefinitely defer paying the tax on the profit. That means the entire time you're getting to use the government's tax dollars for your benefit. Think about getting to do that over the course of a lifetime. What if you didn't have to pay taxes and instead you could use that to build your own wealth? That's exactly what this is, only just in the microcosm of investment real estate.
Well, you know what's interesting about this, David? We talk about it's funny at this time. If you're a football fan, there's a Super Bowl just around the corner, and they say offense wins games, but defense wins championships. And from what I understand, this is a method that we often talk about. A lot of different experiments, a lot of different models in the lab, right? Whether we're doing midterm rentals, short-term rentals, long-term investing, multifamily, etc. For context, and I call that offense, but and maybe you might correct me on this, but when I see 1031 exchange, I like the idea of the defense that wins the championship, the overall long-term gain, right?
Yeah, that's actually the best metaphor I've ever heard. The way that I've always described it is that typically everybody wants to talk about making money when you buy, right? If you're a smart investor, you make money when you buy the real estate because you buy it right, you get into the right sector, you get the right terms, everything's right about the buy. Okay, that's right. But the backside of that is you determine what you keep by how you sell it. And that's the offense and the defense. Actually, I learned a phrase listening to a college football coach, complementary football. You got to have both the offense and the defense.
I like that.
And it doesn't matter how much you make if you're going to send it all out in taxes.
Okay, so if I'm listening to this, there's maybe I do different strategies in my business. maybe I have a different model. Who does this model apply for and who does it not apply for?
Well, that's you're going to get a somewhat skewed perspective on this
Mm-hmm.
because really in my mind as I've watched investors, hundreds of thousands of investors
Mm-hmm.
over 30 years of investing, 24 years as a QI, I've not seen anybody that could not benefit
Mm.
by employing this. And here's why. Because there's actually, we'll play a little game if you want. There's actually 4 Ds of 1031 investing. They all start with the letter D. The first one I'll give you, Ruben, and then you're going to have to guess the rest. The first one is defer. Now, the reason for that is that when you defer tax by selling a piece of property and doing a 1031 exchange, you're getting to use those tax dollars to make money yourself. And this takes us right to my single biggest failure. You ready? It was the very first property that I bought. My wife and I decided we want to get off the corporate train. Let's become real estate investors. It'll be easy, she said. No problem, he said. So we went and we bought a duplex. We fixed it up. We made a ton of money. Is this sounding familiar in
Yep.
today's market? And we sold it after putting renters in it for a little bit. And I thought, wow, this was easy. Until I went to my accountant and he said, you got a $30,000 tax bill. Now, wait a minute. Nobody told me I had a silent partner and his name was Uncle Sam. Nobody told me that this was going to slow me down dramatically from accomplishing our 10-year goal of sailing away on a sailboat. So if I would have done a 1031 exchange on that one transaction, do a compound interest exercise at 10%, which is a pretty common real estate. You can make that fairly easy over 30 years. By that one transaction that I failed to defer the tax, I would have over $600,000 today. That's just one transaction. So
Wow.
it's for anybody that wants to take advantage of the compounding effect of using the tax dollars. As long as you're investing in real estate, keep the tax dollars for you. Because whether it's 2 days or 25 years, that money compounds for you instead of going into government and doing what? Who knows?
Right. So for context, that 30,000, at what point does one realize, is that when you're doing your taxes? I mean, essentially what you're saying is, say, you got, the difference from what you made, and then when you get the tax bill, just for, those who are listening who don't want to be in that same position and, want to be proactive. Well, one, proactively, the 1031 exchange would have saved them. But, if you don't do that, at what point do you find out? I guess it's not on the day that you sell and get the money. Is it during tax season? At what point does that rise to the surface so that our listeners might have some good, feel of,
That's a
what they
great
can
question.
look out for?
Yeah, because it's one of those things where we pay our tax many months after the event happens. So we sell a piece of property like I did, not thinking about the tax consequence. And then several months later, oh, crud, look what I'm going to have to pay. So it really, I think it illustrates the single greatest failing that every investor struggles with that I've seen. And that is being strategic. Real estate doesn't start when you buy it. It starts with planning before you buy it. But just in the same way, you've got to be strategic about how you exit. And you don't start that on the day you sell. So we really try to work hard with investors to get them thinking about what are going to be the consequences when I sell this piece of property in 6 months or next year, and start to plan that way. Because it's like with anything, the longer the off ramp, the easier the exit.
I like that. I've never heard that before. The longer the offer, the easier the exit.
It actually just came out of my head.
I love that. We're rolling then. So you mentioned there's 4Ds. You said defer. What are the remaining 3 that I should be looking out for?
Oh, you're not going to try to guess? I'll give you the next one. The next one is defer. And here's why. Because the 1031 exchange can be used to accomplish your goals in whatever state the market cycle is and condition the market cycle is. Because you can use the 1031 exchange to purchase any type of investment real estate anywhere in the United States. So the 1031 exchange can be used. We see people bouncing around the country quite a bit, right? So
Yep.
someone in Silicon Valley in 2012, 2013 had made a truckload, that's an industry term, a truckload of profit on their San Francisco properties, hadn't they?
Mhm.
By selling them and 1031 exchanging into this sleepy, dusty little town called Austin, where a guy named Elon was heading, they did what? They sold at the peak in one market, they bought at the bottom of another market. And what happened next?
Boom.
Right? So you can change classes of real estate. If single families are kind of slow, you can move into commercial, industrial, multifamily. You can also go from one small unit and leverage that to many units. Or you can also, if the market is telling you that, say, large multifamilies are the way to go right now, then
Mhm.
you could sell several single families and combine them to purchase one larger asset. Wherever you're going to find the best return for your money, you can always sell the properties where they're at and then purchase new real estate and keep the tax deferred because that's the number one D. So defer and defer.
I love that. I
What
think
do you
I'm
think the
catching
third one
on here.
is?
I think I'm catching on here, Dave, but I'll leave it to our listeners to see if we can put a bow on it in the end. So let me ask you this. I'm so glad you touched on this because I wasn't sure until I think, and I'm correct me if I'm wrong. I heard you confirm this that I could go from call it a $1.5 million single family home into call it 4 $250,000 homes in Atlanta. Could I do that and have 4 different
Absolutely.
addresses?
Absolutely. The key in doing the 1031 exchange is not how many properties you buy, it's
Mhm.
how much they're valued. And the rules are
Mm.
that to defer all tax, you need to purchase at least as much as your net sale and use all the proceeds to do it. So let's use your example because that's a great example. You bought this rental 10, 15 years ago, and it's all of a sudden worth, 1.25 million. Well, when you bought it, it was a $250,000 property.
Mhm.
You knew what it took to fix it up. You knew the area it was in. You knew how to make it rentable. You understood that size property.
Mm.
But to sell something for 1.25 and try to replace, you go, I don't know that market. Do I use coriander, granite? What kind of shower head does it take? All those kinds of things to make it a good upper level executive rental. So that's a reason to sell it expensive and then go back into the demographic that you're comfortable with. And of
Mm.
course, the other reason is that you typically generate more dollars per square foot at the lower price points. So you want to kind of find a sweet spot for that. You might have a $300,000 property that rents for $3,000 a month, but a $600,000 property only rents for $5,000 a month. So why not sell for 600 and buy two 300s?
Mhm.
And just by doing that one simple thing, generate $1,000 a month more in rental income.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of things that the market will tell you. And if you're listening to it, you can then shape the 1031 exchange to fit you into that sweet spot.
Got it. So now for someone who's listening, obviously there is a, and I shouldn't say obvious because not everyone's aware of this, but there is a caveat to this, right? And there's, what I'll call a 45-day identification uh, um, uh, rule, which you actually cover in your chapter 7 in your book. And what does that mean? Because, okay, this sounds really too good to be true, and it's kind of is, but there are some, rules to this game to play. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is, and as well as that the exchange period, which we know of 180 days as well? Could you go into that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it does feel somewhat too good to be true,
Yeah.
but the other shoe is that the IRS has made it a very rigid process. And that's why the first several chapters of the book are dedicated to the more boring but necessary things. Because if you miss one of the 6 requirements, your entire exchange will fail.
Hmm.
We've already talked about 2 of them, which are that it's got to be investment real estate, and we talked about the reinvestment requirements. The ones you're referring to are the 2 timing requirements. And that is that you, first of all, you have 45 days only, calendar days, from the day you close the sale of your old property to identify your potential replacements. And once day 45 passes, that's set in stone and
Hmm.
cannot be changed. So that can really scare a lot of people. Now, when we're talking to folks, we try to give them ways to mitigate that. The first and most obvious one is that the closing of your sale has to occur before the closing of your purchase, but you can go into contract for your new property anytime you want. So a lot of our folks will put their old properties on the market. They'll get a contract for sale, and as soon as they're sure it's going to close, they'll immediately try to get a contract on their new property. And that does a couple nice things because, first of all, it means that they're going to bunch their sale and their purchase close together.
Hmm.
So the days you're living without cash flow are going to be fewer.
Yeah.
Secondly, because your new property is actually going to close within the 45-day period, you've eliminated all that stress of naming properties and then hoping you can get them under contract in time to close.
Got it.
Now, the other thing that I tell people in relation to this is look again what the market is telling you. You'll hear me say that a lot because I really think that's the single most important aspect a real estate investor has to have, and that's the ability to listen. And by
Hmm.
listen, I mean perceive what is happening out there, whether you're reading articles, whether you're looking at data, whether you're just talking to neighbors, listening to what's going on in the market will help you. So my comment to folks is always, what's the hardest thing you're going to have to do? Sell your old property or buy the new property. And then whatever they tell me, then I say, then what you need to do is the hardest thing first.
Experiment Nation, you've heard the word MTR, mid-term rentals, as it is currently a hot topic and hot commodity right now because, again, there has been an increase in short-term rental regulations, and there also has been, let's face it, a slowdown in what we were experiencing a couple years back when it comes to bookings. So with that said, short-term rental operators are looking for alternative solutions to tap into the mid-term rental space. However, there is a sub niche of mid-term rental insurance that I'm truly excited about, that I want to share with you, that the experience that we've had, the tremendous results we've been able to have, and that's the insurance mid-term rental space, which is very different than your traditional mid-term rentals. When you think of traditionally mid-term rentals, you think of travel nurses. There is a space, mid-term rental insurance space, that we've tapped in, where you need to be well connected with insurance and relocation specialists and companies and understand the right type of asset required for you to be able to help these families. What's really important that stands out the most, which you can get in what I'm about to offer you, is the understanding where to be found by these insurance companies, how to properly manage your calendar so that your listings are optimized so that they can find you, how to actually gain traction and build a relationship with these relocation insurance companies. I've put together an MTR insurance blueprint. That's MMT insurance blueprint to cover these foundations after we've had success landing very large contracts on single family homes that
literally 4x what we traditionally make in long-term rentals, and also gives us peace of mind because there's less turnover and 100% occupancy, because these contracts can start anywhere from 30 days to 3 months to 8 months and range anywhere from, again, we've landed anywhere from $8,000 to $9,000 a month in per month on a single family home property, which our mortgages are typically around the 2,400 range, which then gives you a large spread of anywhere from 4 to 6K net on just one property. And this is why it's very hot right now. But people who haven't been in the lab with individuals like myself, like Jesse Vasquez and Dr. Rachel Gainsborough and Noble Crawford, don't have the foundations and don't know exactly where to start. And therefore, this is why I'm giving you guys a blueprint, the MTRR insurance blueprint. Go to the website, experimentrealestate.com, and get yourself a blueprint to completely change, or at least have a plan B if you're a short-term rental operator looking to maximize your occupancy and profitability. We'll see you on the other side.
Remember a couple years ago when those crazy folks out in California would put a property up on the market and get 7 above ask offers for cash with a 7-day close the first day? Those were insane days.
Yeah.
How could you buy a property? The hardest thing to do was to win a bid.
Yeah.
So what I told those folks, and what we did quite often, we would not even list their new property. We would wait until they got a contract for their new property.
Yeah.
Then put your property in the market, sell it that day, close in 7, and close your next property. So you can mitigate that in that way, and that's a really handy way. Do the hard thing first.
That is great advice, by the way, Dave. I just want to just let that kind of just sit for a second, because I was going to go right in there. And I love that that's not one size fits all. It's with respect to what is going on in your marketplace. Maybe with respect to what's going on in 2 different marketplaces, with, depending on where you're coming from and where you're going to. So I love that. Do the hard one first. If it's harder to sell where you're leaving from, sell first, and then figure out the next contract later. If it's vice versa, get the contract first, and if you can sell like hotcakes in your market, do that second. Did I capture that correctly?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, I love that.
Exactly
That's
right.
Great advice.
It's almost like building that acceleration. As the snowball goes down the hill, sometimes just making that push is the hardest thing to get it started. But then by the end, what's happening? You can't stop it. It's just gonna go.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. So that's very interesting. So one thing I just want to make sure I captured accurately for my edification as well is, you mentioned, Dave, that this is specifically for investment properties, which means that if I'm living in my primary residence, I cannot 1031 into investment properties, or did I miss that?
Well, this is kind of like, this is one of those things where I almost feel it's so good that I feel like I should preface it by saying, if I tell you this, I'm going to have to kill you.
Well, I'm glad I'm here in Boston.
Exactly. You're right.
Okay.
The Section 1031 is only for the sale and purchase of investment real estate. You cannot sell your primary residence and buy investment real estate using the 1031. You don't want to, because the primary residence rules are more favorable. And they're found in Section 121. I think we've got a couple sections.
Oh, the 121 exchange.
Exactly.
Right? The one before 5 years? Or
if you've lived in
more
it
than
for
2 years?
2 out of the 5 years prior to selling it.
Yes.
If you're married, you get the first $500,000 of profit tax free.
That's
no need to reinvest. Put it in your pocket. Go have fun. And you can do that once every 2 years. So just by itself, I tell people, if that's all you ever do, buy a house. I do not believe any of these folks that say be a renter. I'm sorry, that's not right, because the tax rules are too favorable for you. Live in it for 2 years. When you sell it, every bit of the profit tax free.
That's so good. It's so funny because I had help one of my buddies. I'm licensed down here as well, and he had done just that. And I remember that one being, it's so funny how you don't use it, you lose it, and it just clicked as soon as you said it. The 121 exemption rule of more than 2 years, less than 5. Am I correct?
That's exactly right. Now, you want
Yeah.
me to throw some gasoline on this fire?
Oh, please, let's light it up.
So, while you have to do it, the 1031 has to be a sale of investment followed by a purchase of investment real estate. It does not have to stay investment forever.
Okay, so
And
this
this
is
leads us into
if
the
I'm clear,
third D.
this is the 1031. Just so I'm very clear on that, you're talking
Correct.
about.
So the
Okay.
1031 exchange requires
Mhm.
you sell investment real estate and you buy investment real estate, but it does not have to stay investment real estate forever. So let's take the example of someone from Cincinnati that wants to retire in Florida.
Mhm.
They may use a 1031 exchange and sell a rental property in Cincinnati and go buy something on the beach in the Panhandle. Now that they're selling investment, they're buying investment, it'll be a short-term rental that they'll get some use of. But when they retire, what they can do is to convert that into their next primary residence. So they're going to sell their primary residence in Ohio, take that money tax free, move into their former investment property, and live in it with the tax still deferred as long as they own it. And when they finally do sell that, if they have owned it for 5 years, if they've lived in it for at least 2, then they get to prorate the gain tax free. In other
Mm.
words, you can convert some of the tax deferred gain into tax free gain.
Wow.
Very few people know about this, which is why we spend a lot of time in the book
Yes.
talking about it, because it's a massive strategy that accomplishes the third D, which, what do you think it is?
Defer.
Exactly. Because just like you can listen to what the market is doing and
Mhm.
accommodate that with the 1031 exchange, you also need to be looking at yourself
Mm.
and saying, where am I in my real estate investing cycle of life? When we
Mm.
start out early, we got more energy than money. So we can handle tenants and toilets. We can slowly bootstrap up, buy properties we can fix up, go to multiple properties, sell one, buy two, all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
At some point in time, we start to get tired, don't we?
Yeah.
We start to want to become a little more passive. We start to want to enjoy more of the fruits of our labor. So going from full-time rentals into short-term rentals, where we can also vacation ourselves, positioning our properties where we can retire near them. And like our example we just used, converting investment properties. I have a realtor on St. Pete Beach that did a 1031 exchange and bought 3 identical townhomes or condos on the beach on the same floor. You know what he did? When he was ready to retire, he moved into the first one. He had rented it for 2 years. He lived in it for 3. When he sold it, he got 60% of the gain tax free. You know
Wow.
where he moved?
Right
Next
upstairs.
door.
Oh.
Yeah. And started living there. When he sells that one, he'll again get to prorate the tax
Mhm.
between the number of years it was rented and the number of years he lived in it. And then where's he going to move? Into the next one.
Oh, that's so
What
smart.
an incredible retirement strategy.
Now, did I hear you just say? Because that's very savvy. I just picked up on this, and this is why I like to listen very closely when someone of your wisdom is speaking here in the lab. I heard you say he 1031 exchange into 3 condos that are investment properties, but then did I hear you say that he was renting to himself essentially?
No, what he did was he converted one. He rented it for 2 years and then he just moved in.
I
And
mean,
it
could
changed.
you actually, if you wanted to, I'm just my creative mind is getting there. If your LLC buys the investment property, could you, as Dave Foster, rent out Or could your LLC rent out to Dave Foster, or would that be a conflict if you're doing your books and be like, oh, you're renting to yourself?
No, there's probably ways that you could.
Yeah.
However, when you do something like that, there's so many tentacles
Yeah.
because then the LLC shows profit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's all sorts of things. It's really far easier
Yeah.
to have your LLC simply continue to own the property, but you live in it and quit claiming it to yourself, or
Yeah.
leave it in the LLC and show it on your tax return as an investment property. I'm sorry, as your primary residence. You truly are taking it off your books
Mhm.
as investment and putting it on your tax return as your primary residence. It's that simple.
Yeah, it is. Now, I'm curious, Dave, and let me know if this is still in your realm. Is when I live in a primary, this is kind of less around 1031 exchange, but I'm thinking it through as you're speaking. When you buy a primary residence, do you happen to know at what point if you decide to move out? And not a lender question. I want to ask more around the fact of, let's say you live in a property for 3 years, then you move out, and that was a primary residence. Is it the fact that do you have to are you disclosing that? What makes it a primary? Does that mean that when the next one that you buy, you say, hey, the last one was a primary, but I moved out of that one and now I'm going to make this my primary? Is there some kind of a best practice notice? Do you have to tell that to your lender, or is it the fact that you can only have one primary? So then by default, the one that used to be a primary turns into an investment property. I was just thinking this through as we're speaking. I wonder if you have some insights or thoughts on this, or if that's more of a question to ask
Yeah.
your lender.
Well, your lender's going to have some say as far as lending goes, right? So if you buy a property with an FHA primary residence loan,
Mhm.
conventional primary residence, you are required to live there usually for a year.
Yep.
At the end of that year, you're now free to do anything you want. And
Okay.
if you move out of that property, then you could buy another primary residence. The question is going to be then lender by lender. Will they let you have a second loan that's also primary residence? Or might they require you to repay that one first? Or
Oh,
to
wow.
take out the second one as investment? And that's really going to be lender by lender because there's nothing specific legally about it. It's all about lenders maximizing profit and minimizing risk. So that's really going to be lender by lender. And you're going to have to ask. But what determines what your primary residence is where it's reported on your tax return. So if it's on your Schedule A, because all you're deducting is the interest on the mortgage, it's your primary residence. It's the address on your tax return.
Mhm.
It's where you register to vote. It's where your kids go to school in that district. It's where your driver's license is. It's where your utility bills are sent. It's all that whole big pile of stuff that documents, oh, yeah, Ruben lives here. And
Mhm.
that's what makes it your primary residence.
Yeah.
So for my St. Pete guy, he moved in. He changed his driver's license. He changed his voter's record. He changed it on his tax return. It became his primary residence.
Yeah. That's a great answer. Very good. Very good. I'm very curious. So 1031 exchange sounds fantastic. Where do most investors, if the ones that have tried this, get jammed up? Is it primarily the timing? Is it not even being aware of again something in their blind spot? What have you seen time and time again when working with a client of like either a close call, pal, or don't do that, or man, had you come to me earlier, I would have told you X.
Yeah. So the most common arguments, and the last one is actually going to take us right into the fourth D. I tell you what, you and I did not coordinate this, but it's turning out just perfect. So the greatest arguments I hear against it, number one, they're so expensive. Well, if you made $100,000 profit and you're about to pay a $20,000 or $30,000 tax, would you be willing to spend less than $1,000 in order
Oh,
to indefinitely defer that?
All day.
They're not that expensive. You'll never complete it. It's too hard to complete them. Well, we do frequent audits all the time, and we found that even in the tightest part of this market, over 93% of our clients were completing exchanges. So,
Mm.
Ruben, I'm selling lotto tickets, right? I'm selling lottery tickets. They cost $1,000 each, but there's a 93% chance that they'll win $30,000. How many are you going to buy from me?
All day long. Sign me up.
Yeah,
As many as I can.
absolutely. And the third biggest argument is the timing. I can't get my head around the timing. And timing is the 45, the 180 days. Those are legitimate concerns, but they're easily mitigatable with proper planning.
Mm.
And if at the end of the day, your exchange fails, you can't find the right properties, there's no penalty for starting and not completing an exchange. You just pay the same tax you would have at the same time you would have. What's your cost? Less than $1,000 for the chance to roll that forward. So I really don't put a lot of stock in those type of excuses, because really what most of those excuses are born out of either a lack of research or a lack of desire to plan or a lack of desire to put out effort.
Yeah.
Life takes effort, desire, and planning. And without those three, you're not going to succeed. You're not going to be a great investor in real estate without them. And you're not going to do 1031s without them as well. But with them, the sky's the limit.
Yeah. You know, it's funny what you said about the makes me think of opportunity cost. I think there's and call it not a fable, but it's some kind of example, an investor goes up to another and says, "Hey, I'll sell you this back for 15,000." The one that's a dollar, a penny wise and a dollar foolish says, "No way." And then the savvy investor says, "Well, how much is in that bag?" And so when you think about, well, it's too expensive, we're not really talking about the opportunity cost. If you were to tell me, well, I would pay $10,000 if I knew there's a chance I could get $100,000 back. So I do believe that those who are here tuned into Experiment Nation are not a penny wise and a dollar foolish. And so I appreciate you highlighting that, because I think it's important for us to understand what's available to us to then be able to take action on it. But now let me ask you, Dave, if I'm thinking of doing this, at what point does this become eligible for me to take part in, and at what point should I reach out to a firm or a professional like you when I'm thinking of doing this process? And do they work, does a qualified intermediary work with my closing attorney? Does it work with my lender? Who am I working with, and when is the best time for me to be applying this level of expertise and strategy into my plan?
Sure. So the QI is another one of those required components. You can't do these yourself. The IRS requires you to use a QI, and the QI has to be an unrelated third party to you in every other way. In my firm, I'm the accountant. My partners are the attorneys. I don't do taxes. They don't do law, but we can do your 1031 exchanges as long as we're not your attorney and your accountant. So we have to maintain that. So the QIs that are nationwide in this country, that's all they do. So you've got to have one in place. And like we said, your exchange starts with the closing of your sale. So your QI has to be involved prior to the closing of your sale. Now, how much prior? Well, my world's record was 22 minutes.
Oh
But
my
you see all
God.
this gray hair? Every bit of that came from that day. But
Oh my gosh.
that it can be that close, that day, as long as it's before, so that the settlement statement can be mocked up. But I think what the folks have heard you and I talk about is throughout this entire conversation is that the more planning, the better the result. So we have people that will talk to us and start working with us just through consultation. We're not charging for that. We're helping you prepare 6 months to a year sometimes in advance of them making a move so that they know. Because remember, they're going to try to accommodate wherever the real estate cycle is, wherever their life cycle is.
Mm.
They're going to try to keep the benefit of the compound interest. That's worth some planning. So I tell people sooner is better than later, but definitely before the closing of the sale.
I love that, and hopefully there's no more of those 22-minute. I gotta ask you, what is that? Is that someone who realizes that they just watched the episode like on the way to closing and like, oh snap! Like, what was the, what was?
Oh,
Please, just high level context of how do you get
that
22
was such a
minutes?
fun day. So way back then, this was in like 2003,
Mhm.
and way back then, you would have actual closings where around the table would sit the closing attorney, the seller, the buyer, their
Mhm.
representatives. We were at every closing. And so in walks this guy, who's looking like he's a bodyguard. And the sellers across the table go, wait, we know everybody else here. Who are you? I said, I'm the QI. These folks have done a 1031 exchange. They're now buying your property and they're not going to have to pay tax. And they looked at their realtor and they said, is that right? Realtor said, well, yeah. And jokingly, they said, you're fired. And they said, can we do a 1031? So
No
we
way.
literally put one together. So a client we were finishing a 1031 for, we started for the next client. So we took a 22-minute break, got a cup of coffee, and there you go.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, listen, you over delivered the amount of value in giving us an A to Z breakdown, but I really recommend if you're listening to this, I'm showing on my screen here the Lifetime Tax Free Wealth, the Real Estate Investor's Guide to 1031 Exchange. And by yours truly here, Dave Foster is here in the lab with us, and he does have a guide where, I mean, this is an amazing book. I've gotten a read at it already. Strategic to the section. You got 35 chapters in here about the level of planning and detail in deep dive context of how you can save or defer. And again, I think going back to what you say is the grand scheme of things, doing these over and over again, if you're someone who's liquidating and selling and buying often at the compound level, is what we really don't talk about enough, is the opportunity cost of not doing one, how much it's actually costing you, is what I always love to look at when it comes to these numbers. So it's fascinating, and I can't thank you enough for coming to lab and
Now,
sharing your value
actually,
and
that
insights.
that takes us right into
Mhm.
the last D. What do you think it is?
I
Don't
gotta leave
guess
this one
because you're
for
going to
you,
be wrong.
Dave.
It's die. And the
Mm.
reason that it's death is that the end game of this whole thing is that if you die owning real estate, your heirs get it tax free. You don't pay the tax. Your estate doesn't pay the tax. Your heirs don't pay the tax. You've just passed on legacy building wealth. So the most common argument against these is I'll have to pay the tax someday. And my answer is no, you don't.
Wow, you saved the best for last. It's I didn't even that's right. People often say that you do eventually have to pay, but uh not in your camp.
Not in my camp. Of course, you got to die to get it. And that's not my most favorite,
Yeah,
but we're all heading that way anyways.
exactly. Well, Dave, where can we find out more about you? We see the book, number one best-selling author, and how can we work with someone like you, or you even directly? I mean, are you state
Absolutely.
dependent? Are you nationwide? How does it work?
No, we are nationwide. The book's on Amazon, so you
Mhm.
can grab it there or on our website, which we created as an education portal as much as anything. The 1031investor.com. We've got calculators. We've got a 47 video
Mm.
YouTube channel. Can this boomer say please like and subscribe?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. I'm
Absolutely.
so not of that generation, but please like and subscribe. Um, yeah, the YouTube channel, calculators to help you determine your gain, to determine your calendars, links to connect directly with us, to speak to me directly. You'll recognize my, as my wife calls it, my Barry White voice when you call. And yeah, we'd love to work with you guys, with anybody.
That's awesome. Well, Dave, I will definitely be putting that into the show notes, and definitely hit the like and subscribe button. Check out Dave's channel. I mean, tons of value here in just 40 minutes, but there's plenty more where this came from. And again, thank you for coming into the lab and sharing your wisdom with us. Defer, defer, defer,
My
and when you
pleasure.
die, you go ahead and pass on the legacy. And just like that, Experiment Nation, we are out.
Experiment Nation, podcasting has changed the way we operate as real estate investors ourselves, and it can do the same for you. Podcasting has been the source of the master classes that we get thanks to the world-class real estate investors and practitioners and specialists that come into the lab from all realms, from short-term rentals to mid-term rentals to real estate syndications to even software as a service. Owners, founders, entrepreneurs have helped enrich our experiments by giving us the education, helping us build a network, and lastly, and most importantly, a brand association to open up multiple doors for our respective businesses. If you understand the power that podcasting can have and you know that you need one for your brand, please, you can rely on our team. InvestedTalent.com is my team and the team that helps this podcast, the Real Estate Experiment, become the fruition each and every single week to educate my community, build relationships on the air, and continue to build our brand. If you know that you need to do the same for your brand and you haven't pulled the trigger yet, maybe because you don't know how, our company, InvestedTalent.com, does the end-to-end from the time that you record, from the time that it is published, to even repurposing content on multiple social media platforms. That's what my team can do for you. Simply go to InvestedTalent.com and book a discovery call to see how my team can help you launch your podcast.